Jake spoke about Liz Cheney a little bit earlier and how we're seeing her further ostracized from the party. Here's what Politico is reporting. Cheney's decision to move ahead as the sole Republican on the panel further solidifies her exceptional status within the Capitol, a notorious and increasingly isolated figure in a GOP conference that emphasizes Trumpism above most else. For several of her Republican colleagues, Cheney has now committed a sin even more grave than her relentless criticism of the former president, publicly standing with Pelosi. Some Republicans even raised the idea of Cheney facing consequences for her decision to stay involved with the panel, though they didn't wade into the topic of what those should be. What do you make of what Liz Cheney is doing? I, for one, was saying, you go, girl, when she walked down those steps yesterday, and every time she does that. But what is, in your view, having served in the House, the political consequences for that?
Well, you know, you said Nancy Pelosi had a power move. Well, Liz Cheney had a power move. And I think that she has just made a decision that she would rather stand on the side of democracy and that she understands the consequences of that decision. You know, it is true that Kevin McCarthy and the GOP conference could strip her of committee assignments. Why they would do that, you know, to her is, you know, beyond belief, but they could. And she is isolated. I suspect, I don't even know if she shows up at her conference meetings. I don't know that she'd be necessarily welcome there. But she has made a decision, and I think it's, you know, an amazing one, that she doesn't care about that. She doesn't care about what they think of her because she's prepared to stand on the side of democracy. And I just, you know, applaud her. And I think, like Eric Swalwell said, I don't really agree with Liz Cheney on anything else. But, you know, if we're talking about lifting up and holding up our democracy, better that she stands there.
So, Jake, I want to get back to you real quick. We've seen the moves from Pelosi. We've seen the moves from Cheney. What's McCarthy's move look like at this point?
He's going to try to do his own investigation. I'm not sure what that looks like. He doesn't have subpoena power. He doesn't have anything besides people who are going to make assumptions and presumably dig into things. I don't know what that's going to look like. But I want to make a point here, and I want to follow up on something Sam said. I'm actually less hopeful than Sam is, if that's possible, and I'll tell you why. I don't think that anyone from the former administration is going to testify. And I think, let me take it a step further. I actually think that this administration, the Biden administration, is going to be forced, the Department of Justice, to defend people like Mark Meadows in not testifying because of executive privilege. Maybe Mark Milley's going to have to testify, people currently in government. But I just think, based on people up here that I've talked to in both parties, it's going to be really difficult to compel former Trump administration officials to testify unless they want to, unless they are personally compelled, morally compelled, to want to testify against the former president and testify about those things that happened on that day. And I don't think Mark Meadows, having known him for as long as I have, is going to be very interested in that. And I think that it's going to be this administration and this Department of Justice, I'm just guessing based on my conversations and reporting, they're going to be forced to take the side of people who don't want to testify and say you cannot force senior administration officials to testify about their conversations with the President of the United States. So I'm actually less hopeful that this will turn up much of anything. I think there will be things around the margins, you know, deployment of National Guard and preparedness of the Capitol and things in the Capitol. I would not get your hopes up if you're a bystander or watching this or curious about democracy. I mean, I was here. I know what happened. There were Trump supporters that stormed the Capitol. No doubt in my mind, as Sam said, not many persuadable. I just don't think you're going to get many firsthand witnesses up here testifying about the former president.
And therein lies the rub, Jake. Therein lies the rub. Appreciate you, man, as always. Thank you for joining us. Donna Edwards and Sam Stein are sticking around. When